Now, one of the cool things that you can do with Liferay themes is you can go ahead and configure them to have some more advanced features included in the theme as well. All right. Now, these features that we're going to be talking about are really a way to bridge the gap between our administrators or those responsible for setting up our sites, adding the theme, etc., and us as the developers. Okay. What we can do with some of these options is we can give them the ability to make changes that they want without having to touch the source code of the theme itself. All right. These are done by configuring the settings that can be found in the Liferay look and feel.xml file. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our options. So in the Liferay look and feel.xml, we have the ability to set and modify the theme settings, application decorators, color schemes, and the bundled layout templates. So let's go ahead and take a look at what these are and how we can actually configure them in our own theme. So we'll start with theme settings. Theme settings are essentially settings that you can set up on the theme. You can make them configurable or not. If you do make them configurable settings, this is what will allow our administrators to make changes to the theme without having to touch the actual source code of the theme itself. Okay, so what we do in the Liferay look and feel.xml is we start by setting our theme setting, all right, in the actual XML itself, and we can include the following properties. All right, like I mentioned, configurable is going to determine whether or not an administrator is going to be able to make a change here. We obviously need to have the key, and we'll be taking advantage of this key when we actually set all of this up from start to finish. We have the type, which is going to determine the kind of field that we'll be working with. So in the case where we have a configurable theme setting, perhaps we want to allow our administrators to choose from different backgrounds, and we can make that a select box, or we can have a checkbox or a text box, or whatever is going to fit and work best for this actual theme setting. Okay. We also have the options. This is only going to be a necessary property for the select type. Okay, so if we have a select type, we need to give the actual options that are available to us. So for example, if we have 3 backgrounds that they should be able to choose from, blue, red, and green, or something like that, we need to make sure that we have the options, and it's going to be a comma-separated list of those options that they can choose from. And then the value is going to set the default value for the theme setting. Okay, so this would be, for example, if we had a Boolean theme setting, the default value would be true or false, something along those lines. Now, once this is set, and you deploy your theme, you'll actually see these theme settings available to you when you go to Site Administration, Build, and then check out where you can change the theme. All right. If you have just the basic classic theme set up, you'll actually see some settings there as well. Those are coming from our Liferay look and feel.xml in the classic theme, and seeing those indicates that they are configurable. Okay, so that means we as administrators, for example, could go in, make some changes, and not have to touch the actual theme code itself. So this is an example of what it would look like in the classic theme. We have a number of settings. Some of them are set to true for the configuration. Some of them are set to false. Okay, so again, that means that we have the ability to allow admins to make these changes, or we can just go ahead and set the setting itself and do something with it later in our theme. All right, so for example, if we look at the bullet style options, this is going to have the configurable property set to true. The key is going to be bullet style. Options are going to be dots and arrows, which means, of course, we have the type of select. And then the value is going to set that default value to dots. Okay, so this is something that we would see in the classic theme, and this would interact with, let's say, the navigation. Okay, so we can determine if we want our navigation to have dots or if we want it to have arrows. Okay, this is how it's been traditionally used. All right. You can see some other options here, and we, of course, are going to take a look at some options in our own theme as well. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at the full process that we would need to actually set and use these theme settings in our theme. All right, first, as I mentioned, in that Liferay look and feel.xml, we need to actually set the theme setting. Okay, so this would be setting it here, setting a new custom setting, adding a type, a value, making it configurable or not. Now from there, what we can do is we can actually go into the init custom FTL file. I've mentioned this before. This will be in our templates folder. And what we do here is we use the getter util, specifically the theme display.getThemeSetting method, to translate our key into a variable. So as you can see here, we're assigning our new custom variable, and then we are getting the actual theme setting key and mapping it. What this allows us to do is it allows us to use that variable in the rest of our FreeMarker files, okay? So we could do something in our FreeMarker like add an if statement that says, if the new custom variable is true, do something. So this actually gives us a lot of power to work with here with our theme settings, and this is how we make our theme settings functional, okay? Setting it in the XML makes it visual if we have the configuration option set up on the platform. Adding it to the init custom to create a variable and then adding it into our FreeMarker files is what makes it functional. All right, so again, we'll take a look at that here in a little bit in our own theme. All right, one of the additional options is our portlet decorators. You can think of these as widget decorators as well. Again, we can use those two terms synonymously. All right. Now what these do is these allow us to set different kinds of decorations for our actual widget toppers and borders. Okay, if you think of the classic theme, for example, you have the options of decorate, borderless, and bare bone. Now what these do in the classic theme is they allow you to either have the topper and the borders for all of your widgets. They allow you to, by selecting borderless, remove the borders, but keep that topper and that title there. Or bare bone just removes everything. Okay, so there's no borders, there's no topper with a title there, and so it's just whatever content you have on display. All right, so we can add our own custom decorators, and what this allows us to do is it allows us to set a portlet decorator CSS class that we can use to actually provide the styling for our widgets. And then we have the actual default portlet decorator that needs to be set on one of our decorators, okay? And what this just allows us to do is when we deploy our theme, all of our widgets are going to default to some portlet decorator. And then administrators can go ahead and change it from there. All right? Okay, so in the Liferay look and feel.xml, this is what it would look like. We have that portlet decorator tag. We need to set an ID and a name. And then we need to set the class, and then we need to set the default to one of the decorators we've included, okay? Now we can set the default to just the regular decorate that we see in the classic theme. We can just have that included in our XML and then have some additional options that we've styled ourselves that you can change, or you can just completely gut it of any of the default decorators available, and you can add all of your own decorators, provide your own CSS classes, and set your own default. That's completely up to you. All right, so again, we're gonna go ahead and do some of this in our own theme as well. All right, now one of the other things that we can do with our themes is add what are called color schemes. Now, color schemes allow us to provide variations on CSS and images. And the way we can set this up is, of course, setting the actual configuration in our Liferay look and feel.xml, but then we can add specific CSS files and specific image folders for the variation that we have set. All right, so let's take a look at what this would look like in the Liferay look and feel.xml, okay? What we can do is we can set a default color scheme that just defaults to the regular styling in our theme, but a way to sort of simplify this process is we can set, as we see here, a default that includes the variables image path and CSS class. And what this does is it allows us to avoid having to set the images path and CSS class over and over again for each of our new color schemes. All right, so we do need a default color scheme. And then when we add a custom color scheme, we need a separate ID, we need a separate name, and then we need a separate CSS class. And what this does is it gives us what we call a subclass selector so that we can provide CSS for the specific color scheme that we have in mind. All right, this allows us to separate our normal CSS from our color schemes, and it will only apply when the color scheme is actually selected. So for example, once we have those color schemes selected, we can have a separate CSS file for the specific color scheme that we've included. And the way we would use that subclass selector is by doing something like body.colorSchemeName. So in this case, if we called it custom, we would do body.custom or a.custom or whatever that might look like, and we could provide our styling there, okay? And again, what this would do is it would keep it distinct from our normal CSS until we've gone ahead and selected the color scheme on the platform. From there, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and import our color schemes into the custom.scss and then they will be red once we deploy the theme. All right, so that's another option for us. And finally, what we have is the ability to bundle our layout templates if we'd like. We will talk about layout templates and how we can build those very quickly in the next chapter. But what we can actually do here, once we have a layout template available, we can simply provide the structure in the Liferay look and feel.xml, of course include the source files in the theme, and then when we deploy it, we will have both the theme module and the layouts included. All right, so to include the layout templates in our Liferay look and feel.xml, we have this layout templates tag. We simply need to include the source file and the image or thumbnail for our layout, okay? You can do this simply by creating layout templates the way we'll see in chapter 4 and just including the source files here and making sure it's set properly in your Liferay look and feel.xml, okay? You can, of course, keep them separate as separate modules that you have deployed, and we'll actually do that in chapter 4 as well, but it is an option to include them through the Liferay look and feel.xml as well. All right, so to wrap up, we have 4 major configurable options where we can bridge that gap between developer and administrator, allowing them to make changes to the theme or to select things provided to the theme without having to touch the source code. Those 4 options are the configurable portlet or application decorators, okay? The configurable theme settings, the layout templates that we can have bundled, as well as the color schemes that we can include, all right? So let's take a look at adding some of these features in our own theme so that we can provide these configurable options to the administrators working on the Livingston Hotels and Resorts platform.